והדוברת הבאה שלנו, אני חושבת שיש לה ויטה מרתקת, קודם כל שמה סייפן בורגיני, נכון? זאת הדרך הנכונה, דרור, איפה אתה? כן, אוקיי. תכף היא תגיד את זה יותר טוב ממני, כי צריך גם להגיד את זה עם האקסנט. רגע, סייפן, שנייה, תני לי רק להגיד שיש לך תואר דוקטור בפיזיקה, שזה לא עניין של מה בכך, ועוד מאוניברסיטת רומא. נו, אז יש פה הרבה אנשים שמקנים בך. תחום העניין העיקרי שלה הוא מערכות מורכבות והשפעת חשיבה מערכתית על פיתוח של מוצרים עתידיים ברי קיימא. היא מרצה אצלנו כמובן, אבל במה שתעשו בשנה הבאה, אני לא יודעת כמה אנשים יש פה מהתואר השני, אבל אני מקווה שיהיו פה הרבה בשנה הבאה מהתואר. סייפן, בבקשה.
שלום. אז קודם כל, I will speak in English. I think this is part of the beauty of this arena. After seeing such a presentation, one of the things that I wish to point and that I keep on finding very amazing, it's the endless creativity of the human technology and the human culture. I think it's quite amazing. If we look around, we filled up the whole world with objects, with form, with design. And not only it's not going to slow or relent, but it's actually accelerating. And in this sense, as it was already said, design is this curve, this line, which is constantly in motion, and it's receding in front of our eyes, together with the way we think about us and we describe ourselves, it's evolving. Or at least this is the way we think from an optimistic perspective. Together with it, we are among the first generations, us, you for sure, that carry the burden or understood that we also carry the burden of a world which begin to feel the weight of this endless productivity, of this generative continuation. And I believe that the paradigm of thought that we are most familiar with are not good enough in accommodating an endlessly generative world. For example, they do not give us a well enough bridging in between, on one side, this endlessly generative continuity, and on the other side, what should be the forces that are negotiating with this constant generative endeavor, and to find this line of negotiation upon which indeed design become the line of refining insight. So if we think for a moment in terms of the system, for example, of the metabolic cycle of the human, I cannot stop at the border of the body, but I need to take into consideration and to factor in, for example, the millions of bacteria that live in the gut or that live on the skin. And after that, I need to consider all the bacteria of the soil that take the waste and are transforming it into nutrients. And after that, it grows into edible mass through plants, and after that, through animals. So it's we are thinking about a change in perspective. And what I wish to tell you today, what I wish to open, it's very quickly how a change in a system of representation allows us to extract a few lines of understanding about this incredible generative property of our culture and our technology. So when I speak of form, the first thing I will do, I will speak of a system of representation. And since the beginning of our history, we do recognize in the human a very strong tendency to abstract, and to abstract through simplification. Our most potent tool in this was and is still geometry, through which we are portraying regularity within everywhere in our environment, and we ban through it everything which is chaotic or irregular. So Euclides, in this sense, even if we look around us in this room, it's all we need to describe the space that we form. All you need is smooth lines, surface, volumes, and you can measure all of it. Now, what is interesting is that even if you will go out from this room and into the urban environment, again, all what you need is the geometry of Euclides. Because volumes and straight lines and smooth surface, it's mostly what you need in order to describe for almost 2,000 years. But what will happen if I show you this kind of תמונה? And I'm using here the, again, it's Hebrew. A picture. So what will happen if I show you this kind of picture? First of all, it takes a moment to orient, because in the first impact, you do not know if this is a box of broccoli at the shop of the Yarkan, okay? Or if it is a forest. And the other thing that you cannot do, you cannot measure it because it's not clear if this is not a surface, this is not a volume. It's not really possible to say if it's a two-dimensional or three-dimensional. But let's go to a place which is actually an outcome of planning. This is, again, from the satellite. This you all know very well from a different perspective. This is Milano. But again, if I wish to trace the perimeter, and I know that this is a planned growth, and yet if I wish to trace the perimeter of it, I cannot do it with a line. So it's not really clear if it's a line or if it's a surface. And if I will zoom in, I will find more and more and more details, which makes the length of the perimeter not so clear. So I will take you now back to the forest from a different perspective. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce very, very lightly the concept of self-similarity, which means that if you look at the density and the size of the trunks in the forest, you will find this a similar distribution of density and size in the branches of the particular tree of a forest. And the same will repeat in the way the small branches are branching from the bigger branch, all the way to how the leaves are branching. And this is a very, very robust property of nature and the world at large, and we call it today self-similarity, or better, self-affinity, because it's not exact in this case. And it is found in most living feature. For example, the lungs are branching in the same fashion, the kidneys, the circulatory system. What is interesting about it is that this principle, which suddenly looks to us in front of a surface that was irregular, wild, chaotic, suddenly we see a deeper level of order. And this order, it's very, very simple to build, which means that all I need is to take an initiator, in this case it's a segment, and then to apply a generator, which is always the same, and I apply it again and again and again and again. And what I get in the end, and yes, of course, this is a simplification of it, because trees are much more complex in their form, but I get at the end the complexity of the shape. And this means that I can contain the information that I need to achieve this very complex form. I can contain it in a very small algorithm and repeat it on a constant basis. And this is the trick of self-similarity. This is what allows both nature to operate in this fashion and both us to represent it. Now, what we are actually doing, which this is the most important part of it, we are packing infinite structure, or in the case of the tree, it's finite, but in the mathematical case, you keep on going. We are packing infinite structure in a finite volume. And now let's think again about the trees. It makes a lot of sense, because a tree, it's a system of exchange. So it needs as much surface as possible. And this is how it gets its maximum surface from the leaves while occupying a very finite volume. So if we look at it from this perspective, and I guess it was what we got, it's a geometry of organized complexity. There are more, there is networks, there are Riemann, there is more. But there are a few things that I wish to say about what we just saw, which is the self-similarity of fractals. One is that we respond aesthetically to these shapes, and we cannot dismiss it. Two is that it allows us to see a deeper order and thus to correlate form and function. In this sense, it's this intense structure, infinite volumes. And it allows us as well to support a theory of roughness, where lines and surfaces are interpenetrating, and surfaces and volumes as well are interpenetrating, because these straight lines and this straight surface are actually not so friendly to us. So the first part that we can, the first line of thinking that we can extract is that we can move from form as visual order, as we saw in the first image about geometry, to form as process. And if we agree to go with the description of form as process, we have there two main dimensions. One is growth, and one is function. There is a lot to say about it, but I will just, this is a quotation from Darcy Thompson. He wrote the book on growth and form. The form of an object is a diagram of forces, which means we can extract from it the forces that are acting or have acted upon it. And if we look at a statement of an artist, which is of the last few years, and the kind of description that he gives about his work, it describes his works as explores not the design of an object, but the design of a process in order to generate objects, which means that if before I had the possibility to operate upon visual order and I had to impose a form, now I can enter and influence and co-create with the process. And the form is emerging from my creative activity, but it's a surprise to me as well. This is the work that he performed. It's called Subdivision Columns. I think one very interesting aspect about this object is that this couldn't be done by hand, and it couldn't be designed on paper. And I think this is a very interesting aspect of what we see happening in design and art in the last few years with this interaction with the machines and with the algorithms, which mean that we suddenly have objects that are beyond the crafts but are still very much correlated to us, because we are the one to design the process and we are the one to select the outcome. This is another object that was grown, literally, and we will see from this group of designers later on. Now, I wish to add, we spoke about growth, and I will say now something that we all know very well. If I take 10 seeds from the same tree and I put them in the ground, I will get 10 different trees, though they will grow close to each other. Now, I have two aspects to this. One, of course, is the recombination and mutation, but what interests me at the moment is also to say that when something is growing iteratively, at each step, it will inform the growth by what are the environment pressures and interactions. So while growing, I will factor in everything which is around me, and I will achieve an aspect of both dependence on initial condition, which means the form cannot be the same no matter where it is, and adaptation, which moves form from something which is static and imposed to something which is a becoming that is in interaction. And this is the second line that I would like to describe, which we again see very much in the last few years of design and creativity, which defines form as emergence, and it is something that emerges in interaction. עכשיו, it doesn't matter what this interaction, yes, it's my Hebrew. It doesn't matter what this interaction, how it is defined, because it is by all means an interaction with the machines and an interaction between humans through machines, but still the form is defined in interaction along the way. It is an emergent. It is factoring in its environment and its stakeholders. And we see it a lot in design. This is the same group that we saw before, the bulb of growth. And what I find interesting is that they are developing these algorithms of growth, but then they put them on the net. And with the help of 3D printing, they're actually allowing people to enter, to choose very attractive jewels, to buy and lamps, to buy them at reasonable prices. And even more interesting than this, they allowed a few algorithms to be changed by the users. So you can enter and you can actually manipulate the type of jewel you want, and then you can order it. So this aspect of interaction and community is entering in a very strong fashion, and we saw it also in the previous. Another line, which is very important, is the fact that when form enters a description of becoming, matter itself, it's not anymore inert. And we see it very well in our environment of creatives, in the sense that already we do not relate to matter as inert. Think of all technique of form finding through materials, or here in which the art is created by allowing the materials to interact, or here, which this is Neri Oxman, and she is working with engineering material themselves so that they will generate the form once they are printed. And as well, nanotechnology belongs to this. So the last one which I wish to speak about is the fact that form is patterns. Patterns is what we recognize. It doesn't matter if it is static or dynamic. And when we say pattern, then it immediately brings us to information. So what I wish to speak about is the fact that in the last 20 years, from when we started to use the internet, suddenly we discovered this collective dimension of humanity, as if it wasn't there before. And we started to see how it works as a generative engine. So we have plenty of projects out there that are actually generated by the passage of information across collectives. And what we can say about it is that, one, we do act upon information and we do respond to it. And two is the fact that we learned somehow to inscribe information within form much, much before the internet. Much, much before. All our environment, the objects that we design and we use are informing and influencing our behaviors, our state of mind, our well-being, and we have quite a number of studies today in this direction. So, to conclude, I will use two statements. One is that I believe we live in a world which is as generative as it ever was. Finding ideas will not be your problem. The second is that I hope that you will put your mind to extract what will be the negotiating forces in your creative line, and to find this borderline upon which you will refine your insight. Not to let the negotiating forces be devised by the external. Put a thought to it, because we need to move from a world which needed to be tamed to a world which is endlessly creative. Thank you.